From the 22 News Plus studio, this is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of InFocus. I'm your host, Patrick Berry. I am fascinated by how the power comes out of my outlets at home or when I turn the lights on in a room. I'm fascinated with how that all happens. So I'm excited today because my guest is Cate Colapietro. She is a spokesperson for ISO New England, and she has been kind enough to come join me here today. Cate, thank you so very much for joining me. So aside from my fascination with how electricity works, because it's mind-boggling to me, I have driven by the ISO facility in Holyoke, and I've always wondered what goes on back there. What goes on at ISO New England. So, which is why you are in the hot seat today to educate me and our viewers about ISO New England. So, thank you for coming in.
Thrilled.
So, I have to ask, what is ISO New England?
Yeah, I was going to say we share the same interest of
Okay.
electricity, so this is a great conversation. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that the nerve center of the entire power grid for the region is right in Western Mass. It is in Holyoke, Massachusetts. So
When you say the nerve center of the entire region, you mean like Hamden, Hampshire County, like the four counties of Western Mass? What do you?
So ISO New England oversees the power grid for the entire 6-state region of New England. We're talking
For all of New England.
of New England. And so ISO stands for Independent System Operator. It's helpful to think of us a bit like an air traffic controller. You know how they're, seeing planes taking off and landing, making sure the runways are clear. One of our primary jobs is making sure that power generators are going up, going down, that supply and demand is always in balance, and then that power can move around the big network, the poles and wires, so that when you go to flip a switch at home, the light turns
So
on.
my phone's properly charged and so forth.
And you get your coffee in the morning. That's
Most
always
importantly.
I'm always thankful for our operators when the coffee pot's running.
So every time I take that sip of coffee, I go, thank you, ISO New England.
Yes, absolutely.
So I live in Westfield. So we have Westfield Gas and Electric. So in other parts of our community, they've got Eversource or National Grid or whichever. So are you similar to that? So you cover you work with the power, the grid of all of New England. So are you a utility, for lack of a better description?
That is always my first favorite thing is we are actually not a utility.
Okay.
One of the other, if I can jump analogies from the airport, let's go to the roads. So we're overseeing a bit like the interstate highways. So much like cars are moving, going from Mass up to Vermont to New Hampshire, we're seeing the flow of power on the big poles and wires and seeing the power generators and where the power is moving to. Once a car or a megawatt gets off of the big grid, it goes onto the side roads, which are those smaller distribution grids, and that's seen by your local utility. Something that's also helpful to know is that while we're not a utility, we don't do retail rates, we don't send retail bills, we don't own any of the infrastructure, so we don't own the power generators, we don't own the poles and wires, we're not siting or building them. We are the independent entity that's operating all of it. And so we're making sure that on the bigger, higher level of the bulk power system, that supply and demand is always in balance. And then when it moves down to the distribution level, that's overseen by your local utility.
So one thing I have learned about power is it comes from multiple sources. We're here in Massachusetts, they're always talking about the offshore wind turbines and offshore power and whatnot. But we also get power from Canada. We get power from a number of different places. So all of that comes into the purview of ISO New England. So you kind of manage the accumulation of power and then the distribution to, say, the Westfield G&Es, the National Grids, the Eversources. Is that where you are?
We're sitting above all of that. So just a big picture, we are forecasting how much energy everyone is going to need every single day. And so all of the power generators in the region and imports from other areas are participating in the wholesale markets that are run by the ISO. So we're operating the grid. We administer the wholesale markets, a bit like a stock exchange of buyers and sellers of electricity. So the sellers are going to be those power generators, and these buyers are going to be your local utility or someone representing them, and ensuring that there is enough power to meet that demand. And so we're not determining the resource mix. Those resources are bidding into the wholesale markets, and the market's going to clear whatever's the lowest cost resource first. But it's fascinating because, as you mentioned, we've certainly seen a shift in the resource mix in the last couple of years and changes. And so all of those things, we're not deciding what the mix is, but it's our job to operate the outcomes of the market and the types of resources that exist.
My mind is blown. I'm trying to get it all and understand it. It
Yep.
sounds very complex. Is it, or am I overthinking
No, I mean, much like you said, energy is fascinating. To me, I think it is incredible to think about the fact that, the lights are on in here. There are hundreds of generators scattered throughout New England. They are bidding into the markets. The power is moving over, 9,000 miles of transmission wires all throughout the region to end up here so that you and I can have this chat here in this studio. And
Right.
so it can get really complex, but at a very high level, it's our job to make sure that the power is safe, that it's reliable, that things are in balance for supply and demand right now, but also we're responsible for looking ahead to the future and ensuring that that takes place too.
So when weather events happen,
Yes.
tornadoes, major storms,
Hmm.
is it ISO New England that goes out and handles the issues, or is that where the side road people,
Yes.
as you describe it,
Yep.
the Westfield, Chicopee, Holyoke, South Hadley, G&Es, or
Hmm.
and Eversources, those are the ones that go out and manage and fix and repair and so forth.
Yes. So the utilities would be the folks that would be repairing, say,
Okay.
if like a tree comes down and takes down the smaller poles and wires, that would be something that they would handle. We, of course, do monitor what happens on that smaller side road distribution system because, if a lot of customers are out, that means maybe we need to lower the amount of tell the generators, hey, back down power because there's a big outage over here. So it's really just a delicate balance, almost like,
So it sounds like there's a lot of communication between you folks and all of the, I say, last mile providers,
yep, the
right?
local utilities.
Yeah,
Yep.
because and again, I always use Westfield as an example because I know it
Of
and I live there. So if there's a power outage in a section of Westfield, they
course.
communicate with you that, hey, this has happened, so there's not too much power going to that outage area, so that people don't get hurt when they're trying to fix it.
Yes, so that would be falling under the purview of the utilities. And so we're seeing the sort of big picture underneath us. As I mentioned, there's like the local control centers, which depending on where you are in New England, it can vary. And those are the folks that are overseeing that local distribution grid. But we are in constant communication. As you can imagine, it's a very collaborative effort
Oh,
and
absolutely.
different kind of entities that you're working with here.
So, and the hard part for me about electricity is I try to get my head around it's not like a garden hose. You can't just like pinch it and stop it, right? So, but there are different mechanisms involved with controlling electricity.
There are just so many pieces of like physical equipment. And then you take into account, as you mentioned, weather is such a big
Right.
driver of several things, right? Like how much electricity people are going to use every day when it's super hot. Everybody's going to crank their ACs when it's really cold. People want to be comfortable. And so for us, we have a team that's just dedicated to forecasting. And
Oh, wow.
we have a meteorologist on staff. He is incredibly knowledgeable because as you can imagine, it really can flow depending on the season. Here in New England, we've got, can have really cold winters, really hot summers. And so that's been really great to see. We've improved the number of like weather monitoring stations that we have in the region over the last couple of years. And so it's definitely something that we're constantly sort of improving on.
Fantastic. We are up on our first commercial break. Folks, stay with us. Plenty more to talk about when it comes to electricity and ISO New England. We're back in just a minute.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of In Focus. I'm your host, Patrick Berry, and the hot seat today is Mary Cate Colapietro from ISO New England. Mary Kate, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you giving me some time to educate me on what ISO New England does. We talked for about 8 minutes. I still don't get it. I joke, but it's electricity. I don't know what it is in my head. I can't get my hand. That's why I don't do any electrical work at home. I always hire an electrician.
I was going to say that's a good
Yeah,
professional.
because I don't understand it, but I'm glad you're here to help me understand it a little bit better. So ISO's the big, all the power comes into New England. You guys oversee all the 6 New England states, and then there are the individual last mile providers all across the 6 states. It doesn't matter. So do you negotiate with coal companies, offshore wind, solar farms? Is that something ISO does, or is that you just manage the movement of the power and the infrastructure, the inner workings, I guess?
Yeah. So when you say negotiate, one of our critical roles is operating the wholesale markets, which I like to compare to the stock exchange where buyers and sellers of energy meet. So it could be, a fossil fuel company, it could be a renewable resource, it could be a number of different types of power generators would be inputting bids into the market. The sellers, the local utilities would say, I need this much power. This power generator would say, I can provide power for this much money. The market would match them based on the lowest cost resources. So we're not negotiating anything per se, but we're administering and designing the market. So we're not setting like the wholesale prices and things of that nature, but we're providing the environment for that to take place.
So how big is ISO New England? Like, how many employees do you have?
So we've certainly grown in the last couple of years. I know we're over 500 at this point, and we've got a campus, as I mentioned, right here in Western Mass in Holyoke. We also have a facility in Connecticut as well, where we have a backup control room. I always like to show folks our control room because I feel like it's the most visual, cool, maybe my favorite room in the building.
Well, you were kind enough to send me this video that we're showing right now, which is it looks like NASA.
Yeah,
it looks like, but so actually, I'm going to pause the video right there. So this shows that. Oops, I got to go back. It shows that big screen.
Yes.
Up in front of everybody. What is that?
So it's essentially the power grid if you were taking it and turning it into a rectangle. So in the top right corner of the big rectangle would be Maine. Further down is Massachusetts. And as you move west, you would see, Western Mass is there, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont. And it also shows our neighboring regions because we are connected to other regions. We're part of the bigger Eastern interconnection, which is like the major power grid that runs all the way out to the Rocky Mountains, but we're directly tied to New York, to our neighbors in Canada. And so it's really wild to think how interconnected the system is and how that requires also communication. I know, as you mentioned, with all these different folks, you can add, our neighboring power grids as well, of communicating with them of how things are going on their systems.
So that brings up a good question. So so you guys oversee the 6 New England states. I mean,
yes.
Relatively speaking, you can throw a rock from here to New York. It's not that far. So is there a similar organization to ISO New England that deals with maybe, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, that kind of area?
So New York is a one-state ISO. They are NISO, New York ISO. We are ISO New England. So we've got the 6 states. So there are ISOs. There's versions of us throughout the country that have the similar responsibility of ensuring a reliable power grid.
Okay. Actually, I think you gave me something. Oh, there it is. Hold on. I'm gonna bring up the image there. There it is. So you're part of the Eastern Interconnect. There's 14 transmission connections to neighboring grids. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So how did you fall into this? You love electricity like I do?
Patrick, I was going to say, as soon as I sat in the chair and you were like, I love to talk about the power grid, I'm like, I finally found my audience. My husband's probably like, please, not again. No. But yes, my first job in news was actually reporting on energy out in the Midwest. And so when the opportunity came to ISO New England to be able to, take some of the really complex works reports, as you can imagine, we have folks that are doing, economic studies, future forward-looking studies. The opportunity to provide communications around that was one that I couldn't hit apply fast enough.
And it's important that, companies like yours and roles like yours exist because I'm just one of thousands of people that probably have no clue how it works.
Right.
I hope I'm one of thousands.
I was going to say,
I don't want to be that outlier.
Most folks have never heard of the ISO, but we're thinking of New England each and every day. Like the folks that are coming into that control room that you popped up there, their job is so critically important. And most folks don't realize that they are doing it each and every day, but it's still just something that we take as just such an important mission to make sure that the grid is reliable, not just today, but also looking ahead to the future, because we're responsible for planning the system and looking ahead too.
So who are the types of people that work at ISO? Are they electrical engineers? Are they, I don't even know. I don't know.
Well, you started off with a great group. We certainly have electrical engineers and engineering folks throughout the kind of spectrum. We have economists. You have folks like myself who are communicators.
We have weather people.
We've got a meteorologist on staff and forecasters. I get to produce little small video clips called the ISO Minute, where I get to interview folks in our workforce. And I'm always fascinated. My first question is like, how did you end up here? And I just talked with somebody who came from like luxury hotel management who now works in that system planning area where she's interfacing with the companies that are looking to build equipment in New England and sort of taking those skill sets and utilizing it here. So you don't have to have a PhD to work at the ISO. I mean, some roles you will need sort of advanced degrees, but there is just this wide variety of talent. And what I think is great is that all of the folks that work there, part of what they enjoy is the fact that it is just a really critically important value-driven type work. You know that what you're doing is making a difference, not just today, but for the future.
Wow. We are up on our second commercial break. Stay with us, folks. Plenty more to talk about with Mary Kate from ISO. We'll be right back.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to today's edition of In Focus. I'm your host, Patrick Berry. Sitting across the desk from me from ISO New England is Mary Cate Colapietro. Thank you so very much for coming in to chat with me. I appreciate it because like I said, when I started, I don't really know much about ISO. I just happen to drive by the building and tell you periodically. But yeah, I failed to ask you at the very start, is ISO, is it a governmental agency? Is it a for-profit? Do you have shareholders? What's the backstory?
Yeah, so we are actually a nonprofit. So the ISO stands for Independent System Operator. And so we are independent of all of the companies that are participating in the markets that own that generation. It's our job to operate the infrastructure, but we are independent of those folks. And so we submit our budget and are overseen and regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. And so that just gives kind of a big picture of where we sit and everything.
Okay. So over the years, since the dawn of electricity, how we get electricity, the sources that provide it have changed dramatically. I mean, I think now the big push now is renewables, whether it's solar, wind, or whatever else is out there. How does that change affect what ISO does, or does it not? Like, so, I have to imagine at some point in time, coal was, a huge part of how we got electricity. Now it's probably virtually nothing. But does that change what you guys do at all?
So part of the resource mix is something that's really, we've seen, driven by state policy, which, while we don't own the generation, we also don't set state policy, but we do see those policies really influence what's sort of being built in the region. And so between 2005 to 2025, we've seen a pretty dramatic shift. As you mentioned, you guessed it right, and resources like coal and oil have gone on to provide less and less electricity. As we've seen the region sort of move more towards natural gas, but then also renewables as well. And that, as I mentioned, has been driven primarily by state policy or other type of goals. And so one of the things that you can see in here is just, renewables going from 6% to 13% just in that 20-year time span. It is a pretty big amount of growth.
But that doesn't really change how you do what you do, right?
It definitely adds a different layer. As you can imagine, I mentioned, weather's such a big driver of how much electricity folks use, but it also can impact the output of these types of resources, right? Because you mentioned offshore wind, the type of day that we have, if it's a windy day or less windy day, will impact their output. If it's a sunny day or a cloudy day, that can impact the output of the solar panels that are across the region. And so weather is not only impacting, how much you're going to need, but maybe how much is coming out of certain resources too. So it's accounting for that as well.
So you mentioned solar.
Yeah.
I want to talk about solar for a little bit. When you're here in New England, I mean, there's solar panels everywhere.
Sure.
They're growing, which is, I guess, a good thing. Has that changed how power ends up at our homes? I'm trying to think of the way to ask the question. Like, does the growth of solar or any renewable, does it change like the demand, I guess, or because I don't know. Is that the right question?
That is the right question. Okay. So if your home is being served by solar panels, or if there's a larger aggregate of many folks with solar panels, because, I feel like you drive around now and you see them, not just the big arrays on the side of highways, but the small ones on people's homes and businesses, that means that's power that's not having to come from the grid. And so one of the phenomenons that we've seen is more and more people have adopted these kind of smaller solar panels on homes and businesses is energy demand going down in the middle of the day, especially on bright sunny days when these panels are producing a lot of electricity. They're not needing power from the grid.
Which is different from years ago, where the middle of the day in the summertime, power demand would shoot up because all the air conditioning, people were trying to stay cool, whereas at night it would drop. So the increase in solar flipped that?
It's really made a big dip in the middle of the day. So typically, just if you were to think about your day as the energy grid, what we would see is we'd see demand go up in the morning, a little bit of a bump as people get up, make coffee, get their phones charged up. As they head off to work and school, it'll go down a little bit, and then we'll see energy demand ramp up again in the middle or the evening hours as people come home from school, from work, start cooking dinner, doing laundry, all that stuff, and we'll see the demand fade away as people go to bed. With the addition of solar and these smaller arrays throughout the region on really sunny days, we can see the demand really dip down low in the middle of the day. We actually saw a record low on, I think it was April 20th last year, which was like the lowest demand in the middle of the day that we've seen because the output of those panels were so high due to the conditions of sunny weather. And that meant that, that wasn't power that was needing to come from the regional power grid.
Is that what's called duck days or something like that? Duck curves?
They're duck curve days,
Okay.
yes. And I brought this visual with you just because it was something I had never heard of before coming to the ISO. And it took me a little bit to actually see the duck, which is why I did superimpose a duck over it, just for other visual-minded folks of seeing that.
So I've got on here the number, the slide that is the number of duck days going back from 2018, where there was one, to 134 last year.
And we're heading towards 100. We're at 94 and counting so far for this year. And the reason I brought this with me is just I think it really illustrates the impact of those smaller solar arrays that we first saw this phenomenon where energy was lower in the middle of the day than overnight when most people were sleeping in 2018. So we just had one day to now we've had 94 so far just this year, and we are in almost August now.
And the demand for electricity is going to grow over the coming years.
Yep. Much like, we're a 3-acronym organization. We operate the grid, we manage administer and manage the markets, but we're also responsible for planning the grid of the future. And part of that is running longer term looking forecasts, running economic studies. And so our big report that comes out every year just came out on May 1st, and we are forecasting about a 9% increase over the next decade in terms of energy demand. Last couple of years, energy demand has been fairly sort of stagnant or decreased. There was a lot of investments made in energy efficiency in like the early 2000s. And so seeing that demand growth, we also factor, what is behind that growth and what's driving it. And so namely, that's going to be the electrification of heating and transportation.
More electric cars.
More technologies go to the grid, like people plugging in EVs, folks maybe switching over to heat pumps. That's what we namely see driving this 9% increase.
So it seems like conflicting information, meaning the solar panels are helping.
Sure.
Right?
Yep. And we have that forecasted in there too.
Right. But there's a prediction of more power needs, but there's more solar panels getting installed. I'm trying to get my head around how does that work? So if there's a greater need, if there are more solar panels being installed, wouldn't that offset the increase in the need?
It would depend. It's why we're kind of tracking those various factors, right? When we're looking ahead, we're tracking what will the demand be, what will the resources be, and those solar arrays fall into that, and also what may be retiring from existing resources. So it's how those three things will grow and the timing of each of those three things. And so you can add more and more, say, solar resources or other resources, but demand may also be going up for that other reason. And part of that forecast is we also forecast, the anticipated growth of those solar panels too. So it's helpful to have that info.
I'm going to switch now. You sent me this image about real-time grid information.
Oh,
it seems like there's an app or something that folks can go to kind of track it down.
Prop.
Hold on, let me switch cameras. Hold that up again.
I was going to say, never come unprepared without a visual aid. This is our ISO to go mobile app. And so it has never been easier if you are interested in energy like yourself to find out
download it now.
What is happening on the grid. And so, you can see what the resource mix right now as we're chatting. System demand is at 4,442 megawatts. And you can take a look at what the price map is, what the longer term outlook is for the next 7 days. So there's a ton of info here. We also have our website has ISO Express, which is even more data for folks who might be interested in really diving deep into it. But another thing I think we've really started to work on, at least in my department as a communicator, is also consumer resources. And so we've got a whole page that has things like a fact sheet on like wholesale versus retail. We've also got sample bills, things of that nature. Thank you for humoring me with my props here, Patrick. But
no, absolutely. I love it.
A lot of info.
I can't thank you enough for joining me and helping attack my curiosity on electricity.
Of course. I was going to say, we could probably talk about this all day.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But our time is up. Good seeing you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.